Welcome to the Murder Media podcast, where we analyse and overthink true crime. I'm your host, Dr. Stella Marie Gaynor, and you can follow the podcast on Instagram at murdermedia81, that's the numbers 81, or you can email the podcast directly at murdermedia81@gmail.com. Today is really, really exciting for me because I get the absolute wonderful, incredible and honoured pleasure to talk to Dr. Jean Murley, who you've all heard me quote every episode, I think. There's a Murley quote in this, and her work features in so much of my writing, my publications, and I would say in a good 70% of my lectures as well. So it's an absolute pleasure to talk to you today, Jean. Thank you for joining me. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. I am equally happy and honored to be here. I'm a great admirer of your work. And,
Thank you.
As we were chatting before we started recording this, there aren't a lot of true crime scholars out there at the moment. I'm hoping that increases. I believe that there will be more of us as time goes on. And obviously the genre is so immensely popular right now that I think there's going to be more people who take the genre seriously and look at it through an academic lens within different disciplines. But Stella, you are one of those people, and I'm very happy to be here. Thank you.
One of us.
Yes.
So on that note then, with regards to the scholarship being more of it, could you give us a quick rundown on your work in this field and how you've got to the admirable position that you're in now?
Sure. In terms of my interest in the genre, it started when I was probably a teenager. So that would have been in the 80s. And that's kind of a good thing because I've been able to personally witness the beginnings of popularity of this genre, how it was viewed in the 80s, 90s, and 2000s, really. And then the explosion of content and interest in the genre that we've got now. So that's it's kind of a cool thing that I've been able to witness that. As a teenager, I've always been interested in the darkness, let's say, in my media consumption. I like horror. I love documentaries, and true crime came to me in the form of Truman Capote's book In Cold Blood. I don't remember how I stumbled upon it, but it had a really big impact on me.
Yeah.
And now I kind of can understand why in terms of my sensibilities, and looking deeply in a scholarly way at that book, I understand why I responded to it so positively. And then of course I found I don't want to say salacious, but I've just said it, examples in the genre, because at that time in the 80s and into the 90s, most true crime, sort of almost all of it, dealt with, it was those thick airport paperback books with 16 pages of black and white photos in the very middle, crime scene photos and pictures of victims and perpetrators and so forth, often pictures of the detectives too, setting this sort of hero victim dichotomy. I did devour those books, particularly Anne Rule's The Stranger Beside Me, and the Manson treatments, Helter Skelter, that book as well, and many others. And I just sort of developed this personal interest in it. And when it came time for me to go to college, I became, I did a major in English, and then I decided that I wanted to keep studying and reading and writing, and I went for my doctorate again in English with a focus on American literature. And so I received my doctorate in 2004, and at that time, like I said, in the late 90s, early 2000s, true crime was still not recognized in the academy as worthy of any kind of serious treatment or study. And I had to kind of make an argument that doing my dissertation on true crime was, something that I could do. I had a very strongly supportive advisor in grad school, and he sort of championed my work along the way. But there were a lot of professors who just kind of poo-pooed work and the work itself, the crime as a genre. So, I did my dissertation and finished the PhD, got a job in New York City as an English professor, and I transformed my dissertation into a book that I published in 2008 called The Rise of True Crime.
There it is, the book.
There it is, the book. So at the time, and I think, humble brag, even now, there's really not another book that does what I did there, which is to, first of all, take the genre very seriously and look at its various iterations through time from its very beginnings. For you guys in the UK, it would be like the Newgate calendar, right? And then the Police Gazette and so on and so forth. Puritan execution sermons really got, inspired by sort of understanding that there was a real beginning point in the genre. In textual form, of course. And in that book, I divide true crime into media forms. The introduction covers sort of Puritan execution sermons. And then I do the magazines, which were early 20th century, books, movies, TV series, and internet material. Now, of course, that internet material, as I was doing that research in, around 2006 up until publication in 2008, there wasn't a ton of internet material. I did find some pretty interesting things and things that I think are still worth thinking about and important in the growth and evolution of the genre. So that's kind of my story. Since 2008, 2009, I have published some scholarly articles and, done a bunch of other sort of life things, et cetera, et cetera. Been working as an English professor since then. Along those, like 15 years or so, it's occurred to me at various points that I should really do another book.
You should.
Because there's so much more now to write about and think about. And so now I'm finally getting around to doing that. Sort of it will be an update on my previous work, and it'll include some of the material that I've already published. Like I just said, so much new material and new, directions that true crime is covering, different forms of true crime that are really new. And again, so much that has changed within the genre as it's developed. There's a lot to talk about.
There's a lot to talk about. I mean, I think it's interesting that with your book coming out 2008, that's an interesting sort of on time. That time period is kind of on the cusp of lots of really big things that happened. Like Netflix was on the way, and lots of people using YouTube finally started to make money and all of those things. So it's like you wrote up to the point where there was an explosion across media of all these different kinds of things, and yes, it needs writing about some more. And it's also interesting that everybody that I've spoke to about where does your love of true crime come from, even as a consumer or as a scholar or even as a producer, and everybody's got very similar origin stories of, well, I read this book when I was younger and probably too young to be reading it. We've all got that same story, and lots of us blame our mothers as well for having these true crime books on the shelf. So it's interesting that no matter where we are, everyone's going, oh yeah, I read The Stranger Beside Me, or I read In Cold Blood, at a formative age, and here we are 40 years later. One of the things, it's a question that I've tried to not answer because it feels a bit tabloid, maybe, to try and tackle, well, why is true crime so popular now? Because, well, it's always been there. It's just been the sort of that base level of production that I've talked about in other places. But why is true crime so popular?
I know we can't really get away from that.
You can't get away from it. So I think what do you think from your perspective in the state, but just generally, like what's happened? Because obviously there's just more media around now. But what else do you think is going on that's led to this explosion? Content.
Yeah. I mean, this is the question everyone wants to know. And to me, there's a part of it that's quite obvious in kind of what you just said, that look, people have always been interested in these stories, right? stories of murder and mayhem, crime, if it bleeds, it leads, this kind of thing. So that, I think, is the basis of this explosion in interest. I do know that true crime as a genre is very opportunistic. It it grabs onto whatever new media form is out there, right? And you can see this through the history of the genre. True crime magazines in the early to mid 20th century were enormously popular. And with the revolution in that technology of magazine publishing and the pulp magazines, we see that there was a real hunger for true crime stories. Right. And the magazines are very interesting in many different ways. But that's one instance that we can see. I see the podcast explosion, evolution as very similar to the magazines, and very sort of different in some ways. I mean, one of the really fascinating things to me about the podcasts and their origins is 2014 Serial, right? The Adnan Syed case, a real journalist tackled that, narrated it, contextualized it fully, left very big questions unanswered. Thereby almost inviting listeners to participate in their own ways of thinking deeply about this one case and trying to form an opinion about Syed's guilt or innocence, right? With all of this material that she had really unearthed in an investigative journalist kind of way, right? Also, she made it very accessible to any listener. And so that podcast, 2014, not only did it garner enormous audience, right? Everyone at that time seemingly was listening to this thing. So it did that. And it kind of was also the origin it was one of those podcasts that spurred the growth, the out of control growth of that media form, right? And I think it's really interesting that it is a true crime podcast that was at the inception, there at the beginning. It's no accident to me that since then, so many true crime podcasts have come about and been created, and they're still being created in all these different ways. It's also interesting to me that the particular case that Serial covered, there were so many unanswered questions. It was also, if you see it in a certain way, it's a wrongful conviction narrative, right? If you believe that Syed is innocent, that's about wrongful conviction. If you believe he's guilty, it also raises a lot of questions. And those kinds of cases where there are these big unanswered questions, either who is the perpetrator or where is the missing person, or is the perpetrator really guilty? That is endlessly fascinating to people. Right? It gives us so much to think about and wonder about and theorize about and talk about with other people who are interested in it. So there's a lot to that. But getting back to this, why is true crime so popular? I mean, there's so many facets to that. And everyone wants like one answer, right? You make it so simple. Because of this, but it's not, right? Because it is such a complex genre, of course, there's no one answer to the question of its popularity. I think that a lot of sort of cultural forces have come together at this moment to propel the genre and energize it in ways that are really new. I think one of those forces has kind of coalesced or did coalesce around the Me Too movement and women's interest in making everyday outrages against us that are gender-based, having to do with, misogynistic attitudes, misogynistic violence. It's made those outrages very visible. And I think that is very clear to me in the way that there's many more women creators, content creators, writers, filmmakers, podcasters, and the way that stories are covered, the way that true crime presents itself, is presented. There's a wide variety of quality and perspectives, right? Across the board. Like you've mentioned, is it media framing or news framing? So there is such a range of, I am very comfortable using the word quality when we talk about true crime, there are very high quality iterations or examples, and there are a lot of not so good examples, iterations, very cursory, very superficial, very much invested in this narrative of good versus evil, right, in a simplistic, superficial way. So I don't know, I can get lost in this, Stella. Stop me when I'm like way far
afield. What it
afield.
made me think of is that obviously there's stuff that is quality and there's stuff that's not so low quality. One of the things that I was shown last year at the Murder Media event that we won't speak of because of my PTSD from organising it, I was so stressed. One of the papers was about true crime on TikTok, which is like, shudder anyway. But it was AI, again, shudder, regenerations of the victim telling the story of usually her murder. And I was like, what? I mean, it kind of feels like, well, yeah, all the technology's there to do this, but everyone in the room was going, oh my Christ, like what is that? And what are people getting out of that? And it was at the same time, I was just starting to go down the road of looking at the true crime and ghost hunting crossover that I've seen on YouTube, which I've been trying to put my chat together on this morning. And again, less said about that the better, but it's interesting, like, where do I, and me and Laura have talked about this on the podcast before, like the quality true crime, and there's the less quality stuff, but we don't want any of it to get ignored because it's all worthy of study, even if it does make you recoil a little bit. And then it's to question, well, why is that making me recoil? But I sat down with a cup of tea and a bowl of snacks when I watched the Ted Bundy tapes on Netflix. What's going on there? So I think that does bring us into, we can consider why is true crime so popular now. We've got the explosion, we've got that it's kind of been there over time, we've got the intersection with the Me Too movement and more voices, I think unheard voices now telling these stories, which is what the grassroots media allows us to do. But when we end up with things like the ghost hunting or AI regeneration, is that the right word, basically bringing people back from the dead to tell their story, what does this popularity say about us? And maybe you could add in some of that in there when you said you went to the true crime convention.
Well, they did have one in the UK a couple of years ago, and they're probably going to do that again.
They'll do it again, yeah.
You should really go to it because it's...
I'll get the university to pay, it'd be great.
That's what I did. I got like one of the upper level badges. I didn't have to wait in line because my university paid for it. So that was truly mind-blowing. On that, not only is there a range of quality true crime products, however you want to say it, but I've always seen true crime as kind of a two-sided coin in all of the areas that I study and analyze and write about, right? There's the question of the different quality. Some is quite low and cursory and superficial. Some is really, really wonderfully enlightening in many different ways, in ways that unpack politics and culture and context and social class and race and gender, all of those things. In terms of people's enjoyment of the genre, I cringe when I hear and have to use myself terms like true crime fans, loving true crime, enjoying it. Even that word content, when we're talking about true crime, gives me a little bit of a shiver every time I use it. Because, and this is something I always try to say and to remember when I'm talking about this genre, we're not talking about fiction, that we're talking about the deepest kinds of pain that human beings can feel and experience, right? These are real people. And if you've not been close to a person who has been murdered or harmed in the ways that crime details, I think it's very easy to forget that these are people, right? No matter how far in the past a story is, with the passage of time, it gets easier perhaps to understand and remember that these are real people. But with contemporary cases, I think what often gets lost in true crime treatment is the seriousness of the genre and the seriousness with which we should talk about it, think about it, analyze it, and enjoy it. right?
Yeah.
And again, that word enjoyment,
Yeah.
also, guilty as charged, or
Yeah,
not
yeah.
guilty, but I enjoy. I I am a willing participant sometimes with my bucket of popcorn in watching and listening to these stories. And sometimes the cringe is too much, right? And I have to shut it off. And I'm just like,
Yeah,
oh my
yeah.
God, what? Can I swear here?
Of course you can.
Thank you. So often I'm thinking to myself, what the fuck? What are these people thinking?
Yeah.
In trivializing and making light of. Okay, so this is something I really wanted to dive into with you, and you have it as a question here. Some of the newer forms of true crime, the murder and makeup.
Yeah, the hybrid things.
The hybrid things,
Yeah.
the comedy and true crime, the wine and true
the
crime.
wine one. What's it? I think it's called And That's Why We Drink. I've not listened to it.
That's one, but there's also
There's a
another.
few, isn't there?
There's one called
Okay.
Wine and True Crime. A couple of years ago, that was out there. I'm not sure if it's still out there, but at the time, I remember thinking, my fucking God, what is happening here? So again, like you said, there is, and back to this double-edged nature of the genre, there is something that it just really grips me and keeps me entertained. That grabs my attention and engages me, let's say, about even some of the lowbrow, let's say, iterations of the genre. And I would never tell anybody, especially another woman, why are you watching that crap? Because I watch that crap sometimes. And I understand the draw. I really, really do. Flip side of that, of course, is what I just said. This is a very serious genre.
Real people. Yeah.
Shouldn't be trivialized. And so recently I've been catching up with your podcasts, and I know that there is, and you've made me think more deeply about this, the whole thing about comedy and true crime. I understand now your perspective of this idea that on some of these, like the last podcast on the left, I think is one. Also, My Favorite Murder, the premier, largest, most popular one. There's banter, there's lightness, there's a comedic take on what's happening, and I think you can see it again in two ways. You can see it, like you've enlightened me about, as they're not making fun of the fact that someone was murdered, that they, these are ethical people. What they're doing is making fun of the perpetrators. And I do think that's interesting, useful, valuable work.
Yeah, right? That's some of the cultural work, isn't it?
Yes, it is. On the other hand, being someone who grew up, I'm Gen X, grew up in the 80s, 90s, I have a sense of propriety and decorum that perhaps it's not the same for people who are younger than me. And I get that, right? Perspectives change, knowledge changes, the sense of what's okay to put out there for popular consumption changes, right? I have a very sardonic and dark sense of humor myself. And I remember thinking when I first started listening to My Favorite Murder, these were my thoughts. Those hosts are saying things that I would never say in public. I would maybe joke with my friends, but I didn't think at the time, and still don't think, that comedy and true crime go together. I just don't, right? Because, and this is important, because I think that it desensitizes us. I think that there's murky ethical territory that some of these hosts are going into that makes me really uncomfortable. Again, the two-sided nature of this, and realizing that my perspective is very different, perhaps because of my age, but having seen, heard, listened to, watched through time, right? Last, let's say 30, 40 years, really bad true crime, I'm very sensitive to it. I'm very sensitive to the fact that I don't think this genre should be lightened up, because I think that allows, I really believe that allows people to take it less seriously. Yeah.
Exploitation that potentially could be avoided. I mean, and like we were chatting beforehand, that's kind of what came out of that event I did last year, that the potential for the genre to be doing valuable, useful cultural work could be, in some cases, not all cases, in some cases, or some texts, be being overlooked to be the #1 true crime comedy podcast, to be the, you know, the most glossy, exciting looking Netflix documentary that, you know, that runs through the story and has this sort of, and feels quite sort of dramatic, I guess, giving stuff dramatic license, rather than saying, well, hang on, let's take a step back a bit and be like, well, why did this happen, and what do we do to stop it happening? So it's there's lots of grey areas, and it's really important that as scholars we recognize, like the phrase you used before, that we recognize our willing participation. We recognize that, I wouldn't say we're part of the problem, but we are also involved in this, because we watch it, because we download it, because we listen to it, that it's kind of, it feeds the beast, I guess.
It does. And one more thing on that point, it occurs to me as we're talking, the whole blending, the hybridization of comedy or lightness with true crime. To my knowledge, that only occurs with podcasting.
Yeah, podcasting and YouTube, which have kind of become very similar these days anyway, which is infuriating when you're trying to write a chapter on podcast and a chapter on YouTube, and it's like, stop being similar. Same with podcasts now appearing on Netflix. I'm like, guys, trying to write about podcasts, keep it separate, please. But yeah, and it's because, well, I've kind of danced around trying to figure out why that is, and it's just, I think it's simply that without CEO legacy media bosses breathing down your neck, people can say what they want, and that leads to some wonderful things, but it also leads to some very dark things, see manosphere type stuff.
I also think that with podcasting in particular, definitely it's a function of that grassroots type of media that we've got. But I also think, you know, podcasting is such an intimate, personal form of media. I've heard, you know, I've not done a podcast myself. I've thought about it, but it seems like too much work, Stella. But you know, the voice in my ear, again, the intimacy, the closeness of hearing one person talking to another person, or just one person talking to me,
to you,
allows for me to think in some monkey brain part of myself, oh, this is my friend. My friend and I are just chatting.
And it's powerful.
It's very powerful, but it lets down that guard, that ethical screen of, like I just said, I would make jokes with my friends, but I would never do that in a public forum. I think sometimes with podcasts, we forget that this is a public forum.
Listened to by millions in some cases.
In some cases, Again, that closeness between the podcaster and the listener blurs those boundaries and undoes that sense of ethics and propriety, for lack of a better word, that I think need to be maintained.
I'd say I'm a little from column A, a little from column B, because I think I'd honestly feel quite bereft if some of my favourite podcasts stopped, because it'd get to every Wednesday afternoon or Friday night when they're released. I'd be like, oh, what do I do when I'm, you know, walking down to the supermarket? Like, what do I listen to on a Saturday when I make food? So, and I was reading something about that recently, about podcasting and intimacy, and how it does become entrenched in your life because it comes with you when you walk to work, when you walk to whatever it is. Where else do people go these days? I don't know. I don't go out. But when people walk in, what do people do? They go to the shops. They go to the gym. But you know, when you're doing those quite personal things, that those people are there with you. And as you've pointed out there, that they can sort of push the border or push the envelope of what they're saying, and because you've got that parasocial relationship with them, you're just laughing along and going with, oh Henry, it's just Henry, rather than thinking, I'm making a joke about that.
And then we talk back to, I mean, I'm always talking about, like, I totally
I answer their questions.
Right.
They're not listening. It's pre-recorded for the first. So I'm still super interested in the crime convention. What happened when you went there? What goes on? You go in the door and then what?
Oh my word. Okay, so first of all, this one, it was perfect. This one happened to be in Las Vegas, which,
oh my God,
I think everyone knows what Las Vegas is all about. Right. I had never been to Las Vegas.
Right.
And so being there in this environment where there's, I think, several thousand people sort of coalescing around their love of the genre, interest in it, whatever. It was mind-blowing on so many levels. The artificiality of Caesar's palace, which is where this occurred.
It's still
First of all,
worldly anyway, isn't it?
Yeah. When I got there, I'm in a hotel across the street. I walk across the street to Caesar's Palace, which is a complex of enormous buildings. I had no idea where to go. I had no idea even who to ask, even though I would ask, these various people, and nobody seemed to be able to help. Finally, I made my way up this grand escalator, and there is a set of convention rooms and ballrooms where this event was happening. So you walk through this big sort of archway, Crime Con 2026. There's merch. There's,
of course,
the exposition hall. There are panels and talks and celebrities from within the true crime world. Nancy Grace is always.
Oh, wow.
Don't get me started on Nancy Grace.
That's another episode.
It's a very, very negative opinion of you.
How many millions did she make off Casey Anthony?
Yep. All the big cases with this very dramatic delivery, et cetera, et cetera. And then there are a range of sort of lesser stars, planets and satellites within the genre, within the true crime space. There were dedicated sessions for people to get autographs from some of these podcasters, broadcasters, hosts, presenters, as you say over there in the UK. There were, so sessions where you could get a selfie with whoever. I their names escape me. I am not great with remembering names all the time, especially because it's media that I'm not heavily involved in looking at. The presenters from Dateline, or the My Favorite Murder women were there, and many, many, many others. There was that, and I went to a lot of panels, and each panel was the ones that I went to, and presumably all of them. There was a famous presenter or personage from within the true crime space, and then an interview subject or subjects, right? Yeah. So if it was, I went to one about really interesting podcasts called Betrayal, which is not about murder, but it's about, I would say, the sort of domestic dystopias, right? Primarily marriages gone horribly wrong because of, the man was, and it's almost always the men in these cases that the podcast covers, and generally as well, of course, we know this, but a case where, for example, someone was married to a man for 25 years and it turned out he was a pedophile, right? And is now in prison. Or someone who had been a serial cheater with all these multiple affairs and had a whole sexual double life. So things of that nature. And there was the podcaster and producer of the podcast were there, as well as a subject of one of these episodes, right? So someone who had actually gone through this experience. And again, that podcast was new to me, and I've actually been listening to it, and it's fascinating, and a different spin on true crime, which again, not about murder, but definitely about criminal activity within the context of an intimate relationship. So there was that I went to. There was another one I went to that the host was a canine police officer with his dog on stage. Joking about how he's known as, I'll say the dog's name, Rex, as Rex's dad. And you see him walking with the dog through the halls here and there, and people would stop him and get a selfie. And so there's this kind of celebrity status going on. So there's that. And like I said, several thousand people waiting in line to get into these panel discussions and these presentations. So something that really surprised me that I saw is it's not just people who are really, really into true crime who attend. That's what I thought I would see. And of course, there is that. There was also a really strong component of victims and victims' family members And there was a woman there who is the head of a really wonderful organization called Parents of Murdered Children, which has been around since, I believe, since the 70s. And it's a self-help support group, very respected and respectable for victims' family members, right? And so there was such, I don't know, I really didn't expect that.
No, I wouldn't have thought.
Right. And of course, this gets to, and people would, after every panel, they would open to the floor for questions. And at every single Q&A session that I went to, there was a woman who would say, I'm the mother of such and such person who was murdered, and then they would bring up a really important issue, like, why aren't there more DNA databases that can be searched? Why aren't all felons, no matter what the crime, fingerprinted and their DNA taken, right? So the crime victims and victims' family members would bring up these really serious issues. And I thought that was amazing.
Yeah.
Right.
That's fascinating. And the, what's the word I want? The bravery of it?
Exactly. The bravery of it. Those crime victims, women who had survived sexual assault, that was also very heavily represented in these audiences. And there was, and this was equally fascinating to me, an outpouring of empathy, support, grief, shared grief from the larger audience, People would get, let's say, the mom of, I don't know, Gabby Petito, who, by the way, had her own sort of merch booth at the exposition, which we can talk about. But, if a person of that high profile nature would come up and ask a question, the audience would clap for them. And there was a recognition of their bravery in speaking out, coming forward, talking about what had happened to them and asking these really serious questions. So that was unexpected and really gratifying to see. There was also a really strong sense of community. And I know we know about this, communities coalescing around certain podcasts like My Favorite Murder, right? Coming together and, through a shared interest and this sort of outgrowth of support and empathy and fellow feeling, I think is really wonderful.
Understanding, yeah.
Yeah. And so there was a really strong sense of understanding, acknowledgement, sort of processing difficult emotions that was sort of on the spot there. I could see it. I witnessed it, right? I went into this thinking I was being very judgmental and thinking this is nonsense. It's garbage. What's wrong with these people, right? Forgive me. And I came away with my mind changed.
Yeah.
I really, really did.
I don't know why I would have thought that victims wouldn't be there. I guess.
I know. Well, because there is a spectrum of crime victims and victims' family members, their responses to the genre, right? Some folks just do not want anything to do with being on a documentary or a Dateline series, and we of course see this with the Jeffrey Dahmer Netflix series by Ryan Murphy, right? Yeah. Prime example. You didn't talk to us. What the fuck are you doing, right?
Yeah. Berlinger did the same with Extremely Wicked. He didn't even ask.
Right. That's right.
I've optioned Liz Kendall's book, and she's like, when?
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Spot on. And there's other victims and victim family members who want their story out there. And there were several booths, tables, etc., people in the exposition hall who were there because they had a missing family member, for example, and they were actively seeking people who could help in whatever way, whether it's.
I was going to ask you that. Was there people there bringing sort of cold cases and stuff? Because surely in a place like that, it's going to be packed with what we'd call, the internet sleuths.
Yeah, exactly.
People asking for help.
And it was. There were, those people were represented in the exposition hall, and one of the panels actually there were a lot of people there was about a couple of missing children, but not a murder case or an abduction case. It was a weird cult situation where their mom had gotten into this cult. And disappeared with her kids. And the mother of the woman and the grandmother of those kids was there on that panel, right? There is, I will say, I'm walking away from this thing with a much different perspective on it and opinion about it. And there was a very clear emphasis on trying to help, right? Trying to help. Now, I will say that one of the odd things, and I'm going to need to puzzle this out in writing, is I did see a sort of a strange phenomenon, which was the people in the audiences and just walking around seemed to want to be close to and give their, express their sorrow to victims and victims' family members, right? And there is something interesting there in terms of this desire to be close to that kind of pain, whether it's from a place of just trying to let the person know that we see you, we hear you, we understand your pain. But again, the quasi-celebrity status of some of these victims' family members was a bit strange. You know what I mean? It's this dichotomy.
Yeah. What did I talk? Do you know what? I'm getting lost. What have I talked about in the book? What have I talked about on the podcast? What have I just talked about to whoever's listening? I don't know. But it's like, maybe I did say it on the podcast a couple episodes ago, like Jeffrey Dahmer's father, Lionel Dahmer, like the way
he's a quasi-celebrity.
It's very troubling. And then obviously the brother was like, nope, he's, nobody knows where he is, and fair enough. So, but with the father, what did he write? His book was called, was it A Father's Story? Is that what it's called? Something along those lines. And it's just like, do you think you've got anything to add? I don't know. I'm not really sure, but he seemed to not enjoy it,
right?
But milk it a little bit in a way that could be seen as distasteful. I don't know. Does his book teach us anything? I don't know. Probably not.
I don't know either. I mean, I've read it, and honestly,
nothing stuck.
That's exactly it. I don't have there was not a strong impression. I didn't get a strong impression of what was he really saying, other than the fact that he tried to give Jeff a good childhood and a normal childhood, and there were these, things against him. So, and that's it. Right? Whereas, let me give a plug for the graphic novel My Friend Dahmer, which I think is a really wonderful example of a true crime treatment that transcends and makes meaning of an event, person like that. I can't say enough good about that particular.
It's so good.
Graphic novel. Good. Yeah.
I've got I'm writing the YouTube chapter at the moment, and then that leaves the comics chapter left of the Murder Media book. And I'm not going to include My Friend Dahmer because there's a wonderful chapter on it already. I'm going to look at it's by Harold Schechter and somebody else.
Oh, yeah.
Do you know what Eddie Gein did?
That's also a wonderful piece of work.
Really good. The artwork in it's beautiful. And then I forget who the author is.
The one by Una that you were talking about.
Yeah, Becoming Unbecoming. I'm going to put that in because that's just that's like a gut punch every time you look at it. It's beautifully made. And then the third one, I'm going to include is one that's about the Green River Killer. I think it's just called Green River Killer. I can't remember who it's by though.
Hold on, it's right here. Yes, it's right here.
That's the one,
that's where all my graphic novels live.
That's it,
Yeah, Green River Killer. I was just going to say this one.
I also really enjoyed it.
A quality piece of work. There's also one called Capote in Kansas. Do you know about that one?
Capote in Kansas. I'll write it down.
Yeah. Capote in Kansas. This one.
So for those listening, Jean is showing me it.
Yes, I'm showing. This is showing output. And do you know about this one?
Yeah, I've got that one.
Yeah. Okay.
That was really good.
I
found that. I was fortunate. I found that in a charity shop. It's just for £1 on the shelf. It's like looking around, like, really? Is this okay? It's just £1. Right. So we were talking about the Crime Con, which sounds, I don't know, the range of people that you've described is really fascinating.
Yeah.
I think it's kind of testament, I guess, to what true crime can do. that some families and some victims feel that they can be in that environment, and for it to be a place that's useful to them or perhaps healing for them in some way. And it isn't just, you know, that's salacious, all of that is exploitative, all of that is bad, that there is some room there for connections between the real people and, as we've said so many times, the stories that these you know, media texts cover. I mean, there was a point about that I wanted to raise before, and I wrote it down, I just don't want to forget, when you were talking about the distance, like the temporal distance, and it allows people to easily kind of forget that they're real and to perhaps take it down a road that is not the most helpful. And I've been quite interested in how certainly some of the big names, the Bundys, the Dahmers, the Gacy's, how they've become sort of mythologized, and they've stopped being real now. And kind of what my book is driving at, that they've become characters in their own story worlds, really. Yep, and absolutely. the more stuff that comes out about them, because obviously people aren't done making stuff about Bundy, people aren't done making stuff about Dahmer, that it's made them these almost superhuman, you know, just characters. They've become iconic, and they've stopped being actual people who made decisions to do these things, you know. And that's sitting in that weird area that makes you feel a bit, brings in the ick a bit, doesn't it? Like, big, you know.
Let me back up for 1 second, and then I want to talk to you about Falling for a Killer, which is tremendous. So on CrimeCon, I will say I'm not eager to ever attend another one. It's almost like a celebratory environment, right? Again, the double-sided nature of explorations into the true crime space. There was a celebratory quality. There was a yay quality to it. Just an uncritical enjoyment that I just can't abide, you know.
Well, and even the word CrimeCon, it makes me think, well, Comic Con.
Exactly.
That's what I imagine. But, you know, instead of the Avengers on the wall, it's...
The uncritical look at it. Another interesting thing is that every person I spoke to, I talked to a fair amount of people, not a ton. One of the first things they led with when I told them who I was, what I was doing, and asked them, why are you here, kind of thing. What they would always lead with, no matter what, is, you know, I'm here because I care. I have a lot of empathy for crime victims. You know, I'm here because maybe I could do something to help, right? And that's wonderful, right? But again, it's I know I say again a lot, but it's the uncritical nature, the celebratory nature, the nature of that makes some of these really vile human beings, the perpetrators, iconic. That I have a real problem with that. I may go to another one, I may not. They also operate a cruise. Which, bizarre.
Is that is it called Crime Wave? I've heard of one called Crime Wave, which is quite funny. I enjoy the pun there. But that's a true crime con on a cruise ship, and it's called Crime Wave. So I give him some points for that. But after that, I'm not sure. I'm not sure I'm going to be stuck at sea.
No, me neither. And I don't ever want to go on a cruise.
I don't want to go on a cruise anyway.
You're not missing anything.
No.
I mean, I will say this is such an enormously lucrative thing that this man came up with. I forget his name, but of course I forget his name. But anyways, it was the brainchild of one person and his brother, I think, in 2017. It must make them so much money. So you know, that's just what people do, right?
And it's one of the answers to why is true crime so popular right now, because for everyone who's making it, it's making them money. Netflix aren't going to keep pouring money into it if it doesn't make them enormous buck back. They're just not. That's what they're in the business for, you know?
That's right. Like I said, I could talk about this shit all day. In terms of the popularity, this is an interesting point, and why women love true crime. I think this is something I've just unearthed working on this new book. I think that true crime, I know this is a thing in Britain as well as here, polarization, political polarization.
Yep.
You're either hardcore left or hardcore right. So And of course, that's not true, but because of the internet, we all think that. So this fractured political environment that we're all wading through and living in, what I think is that true crime offers a space that is apolitical in some ways, right? It's kind of the Dolly Parton effect. Everybody loves Dolly because she doesn't really talk about politics, and she's just, infinitely embraceable and kind and, a wonderful person, right? So to me, true crime, it is in some of its iterations, of course, it is very pro law and order. In those iterations where there's this setting up the detectives as the good guys,
the heroes,
the bad guys, there is that, right? But by and large, and then there's the left-leaning, the wrongful conviction narratives that are bringing up these issues, real issues, serious issues within the criminal justice system that allows, for example, sexual assault to go basically unfettered by the system, right? The fact that it's something like 2 rapists out of every 100 are actually incarcerated. There's that. But by and large, true crime is a neutral space because we all agree that murder is bad, right? No matter what part of the political spectrum.
It's like it's clear who's the good guy, who's the bad guy. It's very clear to us.
Clear. It offers a kind of a truth, right? In this age of what is the truth, it's up for grabs. This offers a space where people can coalesce around, Jeffrey Dahmer is a bad person. There is no argument against. So it offers us a space for entertainment, even though I hate calling it that leaves behind. It's a form of escapism, I think, in some ways. And of course, this has always been my position. True crime is a quasi-fantasy genre. It has very, very tenuous connections to the actualities of murder, right? Murders are often the result of, somebody brings a gun to a party. Someone ends up murdered, a robbery, of course, a drug deal, a gang thing, very tragic sets of circumstances, accidents. I don't know about accidents, but whatever, you get the point. Real murder is horrific. It is primarily in this country, and probably in yours as well, committed by and perpetrated against young men of color, right? So true crime, what do we have in true crime? The outliers, the weird cases, the outrageously awful cases, the big icons, the serial killers, the hiding in plain sight monster type. And it's almost always young white women, young white middle class women. So true crime is not interested in the sort of actualities of crime and criminality. It's interested in those outliers and those the strange, the
sensation,
the sensational, right? Now that is changing happily. There's much more attention being paid to, for example, the problem of indigenous missing women and girls missing and murdered. A lot more attention to victims of color and the racism within our criminal justice system and our society that allows those cases to be under-resourced, under-policed, covered by the media, right? So some of those things are changing, but for the most part, true crime deals with the weird, the salacious, the extreme, even the domestic dystopias. It is a fact that domestic violence is a fucking epidemic, and that is shameful and awful and wrong. But again, the true crime loves the outlier cases, the horrible, the Scott and Lacey Peterson, or what was that man in Colorado who killed his 2 young, Chris Watts. So anyways,
pregnant wife and the 2 girls.
Get a fucking divorce, dude. It's not that
exactly. Just leave. Like it'll be fine. How about you fucking grow a pair and you do it
exactly.
Be an adult?
Oh, women. A couple of things I want to say about the popularity with the women. So I mentioned Me Too. I mentioned the fact that there are more women creators, My Favorite Murder, one of the good things that podcast has done, has given women a sense that it's not weird that I'm into true crime, right?
Yeah.
Lots of other women are. So it's not weird. I'm not a creepy weirdo. This is something that I can unabashedly embrace. I don't know, there's that. And so true crime also is, I think, the only space in pop culture that I can think of that openly acknowledges misogynistic violence in a popular media form. It acknowledges it, it allows us to process it, it allows a kind of a public outcry, a kind of a what the fuck moment or phenomenon where we're all just saying, what is going on? Right? Why are we tolerating this shit? It offers women a space of solidarity around dealing with misogyny, whether it's, you're being catcalled on the street, sexually harassed at work, or a woman who is killed by her shitty husband, right?
Yeah. I was talking with my best friend Laura, who's been on a couple of times.
Yeah,
and
she's great.
She's good. However, she is currently, and rightly so, just fucking furious about the epidemic of violence against women. And I think the way she's feeling right now, I mean, hopefully I'll get her on in a few weeks and she can explain in her own words with a lot of swearing, that she's incredulous, and she's like, why isn't everybody rioting about this? Like, why and that's what's really getting to her at the moment. And she's absolutely right. And the only thing I could answer with is that because it's just normalized, that we're just kind of used to it. And she was just like, she's absolutely correct. It's just that central point. Why are we not furious about this? And like you said, true crime there is that space there for us to share our experiences. Because me and Laura were saying the other night, we only know one woman out of all the women that we know in our friend group who has not had something happen to them on the large spectrum of things that could happen to us. We only know of one out of the hundreds of women that we know. And that's right. Like, why is this still going on? Yeah. And it was an interesting, it's just the point that she always hits the point on the head very well. Just that why she was just baffled.
Yes. Same.
She's absolutely correct. Absolutely correct. And true crime, it's interesting for you to sort of point that out of it as it being a safe space to I really enjoy and engage these stories, but also a space for people to share, particularly when it's something that's been created by women, like My Favorite Murder.
That's right. I 100% agree with that. Now, one thing I'll say on that point, obviously, the reason why these things are allowed to occur is because of misogyny and diminishing women, the long history of tolerating violence towards women, generalized misogyny, outright. The criminal justice system is not adequate to deal with these kinds of things, right? And it's probably the same in England, but when the police go to a domestic violence call, there's not a lot they can do legally. Now, what needs to change are the laws. What needs to happen is a more informed set of practices and, legal levers or however you want to state it, that can more effectively deal with this problem, because it is really difficult. And we know now about the ways in which trauma can keep people silenced for years. Or forever.
Absolutely.
We know about the difficulties of leaving a violent, controlling, abusive relationship for women, right? Yeah. We're learning more about that. Time goes on, right? And here it's the case that unless you're going to press charges against your husband, who may be financially supporting you, who may have threatened to take your children, and that would happen, unless that's in place, the police can't do anything, right? And
the rage.
There's so much that needs to change. The system just is inadequately responding to this problem. And again, I firmly believe that it's because of historical misogyny. We've not been taken seriously. These problems have not been seen as, there's nothing we can do, right? That's the response. There's nothing we can do. The woman
just the way it is.
Charges. It's just the way it is, right? she needs to press charges, putting it on the victim.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
The sexual assault victim needs to testify. If she doesn't testify and go through that trauma, there's nothing.
We got nothing. Yeah.
We got nothing.
Yeah.
It's he said, she said. We got nothing. I don't believe that there's nothing. I do not accept that there's nothing the system can do. I just do not accept that. Things need to change. There's enough smart people, women within the system, politicians, etc., who can work to change these things if there's the will to do it. I do think that true crime perhaps has a role to play in this, you know?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I've got that written down right here. That what do you think true crime should be doing, could be doing?
Yeah.
You know, what is this cultural work? And I think we've pointed to it several times in this last hour or so, that it does create spaces. It does point to the sheer amount of violence that goes on. It does, perhaps in cases that we might not think it would be the case, but at CrimeCon, where people can reach out and perhaps get help, it provides support networks. So it is doing all of these things, as well as encouraging people to get a Netflix subscription, as well as people downloading, the latest That's Why We Drink podcast or whatever. It is doing lots of these other things. From my work on it, because I am, first and foremost a media scholar, so I don't really look too much into fan culture and fan studies, and there are wonderful other scholars that do that. And it was actually those people that had found the very odd stuff on TikTok, and so what people are doing with the true crime is kind of out of my area. I think for my purposes, more interesting just to have just general chats like this. So what are you listening to? Where have you been? Where did you go? What was it like? And it doesn't really come too much into my research. So with that, then, what do you think true crime scholarship should be doing that perhaps it's not doing yet, or that it's perhaps taking a while to get to? Because as we started at the beginning of this, there's not that much of it, really. There's not a big band of true crime scholars like there is, say, all the scholars that look at, say, horror film, for instance. There's a lot of those guys, love them all. But what could true crime scholarship be doing? Scholarship
or true crime in general?
The scholarship. Let's go with what we know.
our wheelhouse. That's a difficult question for me.
Because we should be writing it.
Yeah. I mean, my hope is that as younger people find themselves drawn to the genre and invested in it and engaged in it, I'm hoping that some good little scholars will arise from this, immense popularity of the genre, and they're going to have their own ways of looking at it, their own avenues that they want to explore. And honestly, I don't know what those would be. Other than, people like yourself, media studies scholars, I think, have a big role to play here. What do you think?
I want to see more. I think it is coming through more stuff that. So it feels to me that true crime is kind of suffering a little bit like studies of, say, soap operas or reality TV, where it's put in the well, that's just for women box, so therefore it's not necessarily worthy of study. More and more stuff is happening. So there's some wonderful stuff on My Favorite Murder and what that does. So I'm looking forward to just true crime as an area of scholarship having more recognition, having more work done. And I mean, one of the first sort of handholds I've sort of seen on that is I've been allowed, the university that I work is, to have a true crime module to teach students, where we just look at true crime for 6 weeks. And I think 5-10 years ago they wouldn't have let me do that. It's like no students, nobody's going to be interested in that. So I think there's enough now for students to study it, because there's enough things to give out for reading lists and essay questions that I can formulate. So I am seeing that movement into making it be a more recognized area of study, because my previous research, and there is some overlap, was with horror, and horror took its time in getting to a place where it was fully recognized, I guess, by the academy, if you want to think about it that way. And I think I want true crime scholarship to get to the same dizzy heights, I guess, you know, professors across the world that have that as a specialism. That's what I want,
Definitely.
and
Yeah.
for myself.
Yeah.
So obviously, you know, I think
No, I
it takes the
totally
work.
agree. I totally agree. More people to do work, to take it seriously, more different kinds of questions and areas of research and analysis.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to that. And I think that will happen. Like I
Yeah.
was saying, as younger people who are interested in the genre, some of them will become professors, right?
Yes.
And the work,
They have to.
I'm hoping that the work that people like you and I do can sort of contribute to scholarly interest in true crime. And I've also noticed that there are more universities now offering classes in true crime. Like you just said, you know, a few years ago, I have one friend / colleague who was offering a class in true crime. And now I have a few friends who are doing, right? So I think that's changing. I hope to see more work done on true crime and race, right? I would love to see that.
Yeah.
I don't know if I've encountered any scholarship on that. Maybe some articles, right?
The only articles, yeah, but the monograph isn't there yet.
Yeah.
Hopefully someone's in it. I mean, I did see a proposal recently for, and obviously I won't name names yet, talking about Italian true crime and like the imagined Italian criminal, which was really, really fascinating. And it was interesting, just the fact that it was taking it away from the serial killers, which I thought was something. So maybe that's an answer as well, that true crime scholarship can start to look at other crimes. So, you know, you've got crimes against Indigenous women, people of color, and then just again, do we need more stuff about Jeffrey Dahmer and Ted Bundy, ignoring the fact that my book is talking about those cases.
I know, me too. You can't get away from it.
You can't get away from it. So with that, then, should we talk about Falling for a Killer?
One more point about the scholarship, but yes. Something that I've always been interested in, and I just don't have the capacity to do it myself, is true crime in other countries.
Yeah.
Like, do people in India like true crime? Do they watch it, listen to it?
And I know they do for a fact. I had a master's student last year. She was from India, and she did her dissertation on the Desi True Crime podcast, which is on YouTube.
Yes.
And it was wonderful because she brought loads of stuff to me, of course, that I'd never seen, never read, never heard of.
Yeah.
You know, I should have been. So I will read your draft and give you feedback, but I just need to watch 10 more episodes of this and I'll be right with you because it was fascinating. And the crimes that was covering were all from India.
Right. That's so cool.
Really interesting.
You know, something I would be really interested in reading. Somebody needs to do this work. Everybody
someone out there.
Is the way in which true crime is different in different countries. The culture, the different cultures and how those create or maybe don't create different kinds of murder narratives and narrative treatments of murder events, right? Because I bet it has to be different. It's a totally different culture.
Yeah.
In every country. So I would love to see someone do work like that. And it's most likely it's going to be scholars from other countries, right? And that's fucking awesome. That should happen.
Yeah.
All right. So Falling for a Killer, one of the best pieces of true crime media that I have encountered in the past ever.
In a long time. Yeah.
You know about Hallie Rubenfeld's book, The Five?
Yes. Yeah.
Also a really wonderful work in the genre. There was so much about that particular series that I loved. But pointing out that everyone knows the name of the killer, but who can say the name of any of the victims, right? And, you know, there's a weird, again, propelled by misogyny, we know this, but there's a weird thing within that focus on the killer is that if you didn't have a victim, there wouldn't be a story. right? So why are we ignoring victims narratives, other than giving a thumbnail sketch about, oh, she was beautiful, she lit up a room.
She lit up a room, yeah.
That's such a trope, right?
Yeah.
So
there's a thing that I saw going around social media recently, just a random meme saying, I really try to not light up a room because then I won't get murdered.
That's really good. I love that. I love that. Yeah. So falling for a killer, the open acknowledgement on the part of some of the interview subjects who would say, you know, for so long, this story has been all about him. It is not. And it is time for us to tell our story of these horrible events that happened to us, to our daughters, to our sisters, to our friends, right? And fucking hell, it took a long time for that to happen.
So falling for a killer, the thing that one of the many things that I appreciated about it, there's so much about it that I really thought was incredibly useful, and all of that important work that we've already talked about, was when those victims' families, mothers, friends, sisters, when they didn't just talk about the horrible event that took that girl's life, they just talked about those women
as people,
what they liked. I think one of my favorites was the lass who's talking about being at university, sharing a room with Linda Healy, and there's some photographs of them like painting the walls, and it's like they just look like the photographs that we all had when we all lived in that first terrible rented house. And it was just the warmth in some of those interviews was really beautiful and was much needed, because it was like, yes, of course, you know, you feel empathy and you feel sadness, but there was more of a connection there with listening to them talk about, we used to go to study hall together, and we used to, we were talking about making dinner, and just all of those everyday things that I thought were just so beautiful, and also just really fucking important to remember.
And missing. And missing from
people.
Previous true crime. Yeah, I totally agree. I loved that. I found it very touching, very moving, very important. I also really appreciated putting those events within the wider context of second wave feminism. No one has ever talked about that, except maybe I talked about it a little bit in my book. But you can't remove, if you want to tell a murder narrative, you can't ignore the context. And there's been some really cool work done on why there seemed to be so many serial killers in the 70s and 80s. And that one book about lead in our environment.
Murderland. I got it the other day. I'm going to read it. I'm going to go away for a week. I'm going to go camping. Yay.
Yeah, it's so good.
I'm saving it for then. But yeah, I'm very excited.
Yeah, but ignoring the context, I think, is not just not the right thing to do, but kind of dumb. If you're trying to do really good true crime, you have to comprehend and look at context. And they did such a good job with that.
I don't know if it's the first episode or the second episode of it, that maybe they both do. Like they start with like women's rights marches, and they start with there's the montage of footage of, you know, a young lady explaining why they want equal rights, and this guy just sort of, you know, brushing her off. In those opening sequences, you can feel the seething anger of the time, and how it's obviously still here now, and everything that, you know, my pal Laura is furious about now. But you could feel that frustration, that anger, and just I think the word seething is the best way to describe it, because it wasn't just there was this prick of a man running around entering these women's lives and taking it away from them, but it's everything else that was going on.
That's right.
It's crucial to understanding the story.
That's right.
And that we should feel that anger still for these women.
Yep. I really strongly agree. Yeah.
It's a wonderfully put together series.
The fact that women experienced those series of events, of murders, as kind of a slapping back, right?
Yeah.
We had just begun to move beyond, you know, the language of, oh, we're co-eds in college, right? Rather than students. We had just, in this country at least, women had just been able to open their own credit card accounts without the signature of a husband. And the sort of slapping down of that growing, burgeoning independence and freedom is a huge part of that story.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I thought, I mean, I can't say enough about that series. I love it.
It's so good. And then I watched it and then was insufferable for weeks after. Anyone who happened to cross my path, you must watch this thing.
I know, me too. The only thing I don't understand is why they gave it that stupid title.
Yeah, I'd have called it something else.
I know. I guess marketing.
Yeah, probably. Yeah.
That explains it. Yeah.
Yeah. So on that then, is there any true crime text content that you actively avoid? That you're
Yes.
like, I'm having nothing to do with that.
The avoid one, yes, I avoid things like Dateline. That other one, I can't remember the name of it. The ones that give very superficial, we have to pack this story into 1 hour. They use the same tropes and the same sort of stock figures. Almost. Those I avoid. I avoid the comedy true crime podcasts. Although I have a love-hate relationship with Bailey. She's so beautiful and animated and charismatic. And I love the makeup. It's so cool. And I appreciate, because what I heard you talking about, I appreciate this blending of a female endeavor with, the female coded interest in murder stories. So, but I haven't watched her in a while. My friend, who I referenced before, refers to Dateline as the fast food of true crime.
That's good. Yeah.
You kind of have to indulge in it once in a while.
Yeah.
Things like that. Truth be told, I don't listen to My Favorite Murder. I have a lot of problems with it, mostly having to do with the comedy parts. But I know that there's good cultural work being done there.
Yeah.
But personally, I'm not into it. The Netflix things and the whole streaming, on whatever service. Some of them I can just tell by looking at them. That's like, not another one of these, right? And some of them are really great. And I just, there were a couple of pieces on HBO 5 years ago or so. And let's see, I have it up here somewhere. Black and Missing on HBO.
Right. See, if I want to watch those, I have to pay for another streaming service.
Yeah,
which would be another $15.99 a month.
Yep.
Which
Who wants to do that? I know. Sometimes I'll just do like a free subscription, watch the thing and cancel
and
it.
Get them all in.
Yeah. So Black and Missing is wonderful, and it sort of is about these two women, I think they're sisters, who have started an organization. They were actually at CrimeCon.
Right.
They started an organization to bring attention to the fact that still in 2026, when, let's say, a 15-year-old Black girl goes missing, you call the police, where's my daughter? And the police will say, well, she probably ran away. Yeah. And that doesn't happen with young white girls who go missing.
Yeah.
So that's a really good one. Another really good one is called the Atlanta Child Murders. Right, here it is. Atlanta's Missing and Murdered, The Lost Children. That is another really good series that gets into context and gets to what was happening within the Black community in the 80s when those cases were occurring, and these sort of political dynamics that were in play there with the mayor, the community of moms, things that in the standard telling of that story, nobody looks at that. And that is one series that did such a great job with contextualizing, just like Falling for a Killer. And the moms of some of those kids are on it, and it's really quite affecting and moving. So I also am a big fan of, there's a regional true crime podcast called Dark Down East.
Okay.
And it narrates both historical and contemporary stories of murdered and missing people, men and women, in the New England region of the States. I'm originally from Maine, so there's that personal connection. But it's not just that. It's by a very serious journalist. The stories are very engaging, and she's wonderfully sensitive and serious about presenting these cases. And her sort of tagline, unlike "Stay sexy and don't get murdered," is, this is what she says at the end of every show. I tell these stories to not let these people get lost to time, right? To bring attention to the fact that these are real people, this is real pain, and we need to pay attention, right? So I love that. Can't remember the last recent. Oh, the podcast series called In the Dark. Do you know about that one?
Yeah.
Wonderful, wonderful. Season 1, I thought, was one of the best treatments of child abduction and murder that I've ever encountered. Again, she fills out such a big context of that. Between the failings of law enforcement, the aftermath, which I never knew about, which is the mom of Jacob Wetterling, the kid who was murdered, was instrumental in creating the sex offenders registry here in the States. Not only did she help create that, but she now kind of regrets how it's, not that she helped create it, but the way it's being used, right?
Yeah.
That was also, I can't recommend that enough. There's a book called Picking Cotton that narrates the story of a woman who was raped here in the States in 1985, and she identified her rapist. And when DNA came about, and he was in prison for 9 years, I believe, or 11 years. And when DNA came about, it was proven that he was not the perpetrator.
Right.
And not only that, but the best part of that book is that when he got out of prison, he and the victim, her name is Jennifer Thompson, they became very close friends and have become advocates within the innocence movement here in the state. Yeah. So that's a great book. It's called Picking Cotton. Oh, there's also there's a journalist whose name is Jill Leovy, Leovy. Most of the ones that I like are done by real journalists, of course, and serious documentarians. That is a book. It's called Ghetto Side. It's the name of a neighborhood in Los Angeles. And she hates true crime.
Right.
And I have no problems with her perspective. But it's a book about a murder that occurred in South Central Los Angeles. We all know it's, many gangs, many murders occur there, the kind of murders that never get the true crime treatment. And she's, again, looking at context, the over-policing and under-policing of Black communities, right? When something terrible happens, when a mom's son is murdered, the police, their stock response is, well, no one in that community talks to us, so there's nothing we can do. Never gonna get any leads, right? They won't talk to us, so move on. It was a gang thing, move on. So it's a great book that looks at that phenomenon.
Sounds wonderful.
Yeah.
I'm excited. I've just finished Brian McCann's The Bundy Archive.
Oh, I don't know about that.
Oh, you got to read it. It's beautifully written. I mean, that would be my first review of it. Like his writing style is just gorgeous, and it's part look at what McCann is sort of bringing together as this Bundy archive, and sort of part memoir and sort of his position inside the world of masculinity. Really, really good. I finished it yesterday, but thoroughly enjoyed that. And then the next one on my list is Murderland, about the lead in the smelting factories. So I'm quite excited about that, because I've heard the lead theory in various places over the years. So I'm interested to read what this actually is and what it means. And again, it's context, isn't it? It's more context and more of the surrounding stuff, rather than here's a bunch of bastards and this is what they did.
Exactly.
It's the bigger, wider story, which I think is probably the last thing on here. What do I think true crime could do? It's that, it's bigger, it's contextual stuff. Sorry, my cat is chewing a plastic bag.
As they do.
Marg, bless her. She moves slowly from room to room when it's hot, just like following the cooler rooms around the house. Oh mate, it's not a good time to have fur, is it? Bless her.
Poor thing.
I know.
No.
Anyway, cats aside, this is a cat podcast. I think we've covered everything.
Yeah.
I mean, we could go for hours and hours and hours, but I'm well aware that it's the start of your day and it's the end of my day. So I'm very much looking forward to your next book, no pressure.
I'm looking forward to yours.
But everything we said, true crime has a lot of work to do. It does do a lot of good work. True crime scholarship does have lots of spaces that it can move into, which I think we can look forward to over the next however long. I'd just really like to thank you for your time this morning. I know we're all mad busy all the time, so I appreciate you getting in touch, and I really appreciate your time. And yeah, thank you.
Absolutely.
Lots to talk about.
You're welcome. Thank you. I love talking about true crime, as you can tell.
As we can tell. Excellent. What a lovely chat with Jean Murley. Her book, The Rise of True Crime, was the first scholarly thing I read when I started down this path of exploring true crime, which was 3-4 years ago, a while ago. But as like a really foundational text, it's really useful, and it helped me to understand true crime more generally. It helped me to understand how to approach it, or how I was going to approach it, and it also helped me to understand where true crime sits in a larger media landscape. So it's really exciting that Jean is writing another book, like she said, and I can't wait to read it. And it made me think about, so I'm thinking about her book now with The Rise of True Crime, and it made me think about when I was doing TV horror, there were 2 books back then that were my foundations as well. So Amanda Lott's book, The Television Will Be Revolutionised, and Stacey Abbott and Lorna Jowett's book, TV Horror, Investigating the Dark Side of the Small Screen. Like throughout my PhD, even when I was writing my PhD proposal, my PhD process, writing the thesis, and then turning that into my first book, I went back to those 2 books again and again. I went back to The Television Will Be Revolutionised and TV Horror so many times. I still go back to them now. Like, don't leave those books, they're regularly off the shelves. So Jean's book, The Rise of True Crime, alongside Tanya Horrocks' Justice on Demand, they've been my Bibles, my sort of ride or die books as I go about this murder media project. So it was really nice to chat to her, and it's really nice to hear that she's working on another one. So really, I suppose this little outro is a big thank you to Jean Murley for joining us for this episode, but it's also a broader, bigger, massive thank you to all those wonderful scholars who write such rich, foundational, resourceful, sharp and thoughtful books, all those books and journal articles that inspire me and inspire many others to do this job, basically. So what's next with Murder Media then, or the Murder Media podcast? What's next with Murder Media is I keep writing the book. What's next with the Murder Media podcast? This 2-week schedule seems to be working okay, hasn't it? So I should have another episode coming in about 2 weeks, and then I'm having a little holiday, so that might slow the schedule down, but it's not been as chaotic as last year, so I'm taking that as a win. If there's a 3-week break as we enter August, then it is, isn't it? What am I going to do? I can't record a podcast while I'm out camping. I mean, I'm not. So I hope everyone has a good 2 weeks, and I'll be back in 2 weeks this time, and then after that, I don't know. Don't hold me to it. Take care, everyone. Goodbye.